Hi, my name is Michelle Chalfoun, and I wrote The Treasure of Maria Mamoun.
All right, great, thank you. Thank you for coming today for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
It's not going to take too long, we only have a few questions.
Okay.
But one of the first ones is that the Arab American Book Awards were designed to honor books written by or written about Arab Americans, and your book is both.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about your family background and history?
My dad, Salim Chalfoun, was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, and he came to the U.S. in his 20s in 1965. He met my mom, who was the daughter of German immigrants in Paris. They were both students in Paris, and they fell in love, and she followed him back to Beirut, and they got married there. And then they settled in New York. They came to the U.S. And so I was born in the U.S. I was born in the Bronx. I was baptized at Our Lady of Lebanon in Brooklyn Heights, just like the main character. She has one Lebanese parent and one non-Lebanese parent, though I changed it up a little bit in the book. And yeah, she was the only Arab American in her community, and our family too. We were the only Arab Americans in our community. We would go to Atlantic Avenue to get our groceries, because this was back in the day when you had to specialty shop for tahini,
Right,
and that wasn't everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And you had to make your own lebni. You had to put the yogurt in the cheesecloth and have it drip into the sink, because you couldn't buy the tub of lebni. Now it's totally easy, but
go to Whole Foods sometimes.
Yeah, and so the character in the book and I have some similarities, except there's a bit of a time shift. I was born in 1966, and so my childhood was the 70s, 80s. This is a contemporary book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said that there's a lot in Moorea that you see in yourself.
Yes.
Was that kind of intentional, or did that just?
No, originally I was just writing a generic character who, as a result, would probably have read as just white American child.
Right.
And my daughter, my children are, they came into the family through adoption. They were born in Guatemala. And my daughter came home from school one day and she said, "Mom, why is it that the white characters get to have adventures, but if it's a person of color, it's always about that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, if they're Mexican, they're always getting deported or running for the border, and if they're Jewish, it's always the Holocaust. And, why don't kids of color get to be magic or go through wardrobes or whatever?" And I realized that I was completely guilty of doing that, of just, homogenizing my character because I thought there would be greater readership. Or I don't even know what it was. I think it might be for a lot of various uncomfortable reasons. And I was like, why I'm not doing that anymore. I'm over it. And so I just was like, I'm just going to make the character a kid like I was, and this is the book for the kids like me who would read The Secret Garden or read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and none of the characters would look like them or have their family. I'm just going to write that book now. And so I changed it at that point.
Okay. And why do you think that's do you think that's an important thing for children to see those kind of diversity in characters?
I think it is. I think it is important. I think, so now I'm going to say the uncomfortable thing is when I was growing up, my dad, whose name was Salim, and he was obviously Middle Eastern and a very strong accent, he had black hair, a lot of hair, would tell everyone his name was Joe, and he would say his accent was French. And one of the things he said to me when I went off to college was, "You're really lucky because you can pass. You look like your mom." And, and we were taught, if you were asked, you said you were French. If you were really pushed, you might admit to Phoenician. And you're constantly, I was constantly being told that this is the thing you don't say because, when I was growing up, Beirut was a bad bar on the Lower East Side. I mean, it was the horrible place, and if you wanted to shock people, you'd name your bar Beirut or something because the bombs were always dropping and that sort of thing. So I think I grew up with a real sense of your heritage is at home, and in the outside world, you're not that. And you don't admit to it, and you never say it or whatever. So I think that was reinforced by everything that I read. There were no Arabs or Arab Americans anywhere unless they had a keffiyeh on and they were a terrorist.
Right.
And that was it. That was the only option. The other possibility was a belly dancer, like a hypersexualized belly dancer. And those were the Arabs. And that was it. And so to have a character who's just, yeah, she's Arab American, and that's not really the point. She's still a human being, and she's not a belly dancer, and she's not a terrorist. She's a kid. And she gets to do things that kids do.
Yeah, I think you do a really good job in the book of like writing Moorea as a, like, I get a really good sense of how she's a kid and how she acts, and like very inquisitive and stuff like that. She's really well written in the book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have a daughter, so
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
Do you is it writing for young readers?
Well, I wrote for the young good reader.
Okay.
You know, so I didn't dumb down my language at all. I didn't do any of the things you might do in an. I've also written 2 books for adults a long time ago, and in that you can sort of play with time. Whereas for a child, I figured it was easier to just be linear. Not a lot of flashbacks, not a lot of switching back and forth between characters. You know, the story is from her point of view closely, and it's beginning, middle, end. It just kind of follows like a track. But as far as vocabulary is concerned, I didn't dumb down the vocabulary. If I felt like throwing in an Arabic word, I did. I figured they were going to move along with me and figure it out. And if they couldn't, then that's not their reading level book. And I did do a little research on reading levels. I do also work in the school system, and I have 2 kids myself that this book was actually written for them originally, so I sort of had an idea of my ideal reader, but it really wasn't that hard.
Okay.
But then again, I wasn't writing for the reluctant reader, you know, which I think would be a challenge. You know, if you're trying to write an interesting book for a kid who doesn't read well, I'm not sure how you do that. So I wrote for the child who reads well, and that made it easier for me, I think, actually.
Yeah. So I think I just have one more question that I've written down, but I did want to ask you something or mention something before that. You said how you kind of weave in Arabic words and French words into there. I thought that was really cool. And I speak a bit of Arabic and a bit of French, so it wasn't like I didn't really stumble over it.
Yeah.
But I think that is a really interesting thing that, like, for young readers, these words may be foreign, but they're put in a context where, like, you can kind of pick up on it even if you don't know exactly what this word means. Is that something that you are writing from experience on? Is that something?
Yeah, at home there were certain words that were always said in French. There were certain words that were always said in Arabic. You know, like Dad ate bizzer. He didn't eat pumpkin seeds. They were bizzer. You know, so that word was always. And if you touched something in a store, it was always touche pas, and you got the hand slap. So you know, the English mistakes, the little words, those were the ones that my parents used. Though I didn't know how to spell them. That was the thing. I didn't know how they translated into English. And when I did a web search, there was such a variety of ways. And I decided right away I wasn't going to use any of the strange lettering. You know how there's sometimes like a 3 put in? Yeah. I decided that would just take people right out of the story. So I called my Uncle Fuad and I was like, okay, Uncle Fuad, if I were to say this to you, how do you think it would be spelled in English? And he was like, I don't even speak Arabic anymore. What are you talking about? Which is crazy because he grew up in Syria. He was with my dad, he was one of the cousins that they were summering together all the time. And he's like trying to pretend he didn't speak Arabic anymore. And I was like, just spell it for me in English. What do you think? And he told me, and then I would call up some other people and they'd give me their version. And so I just decided to kind of go for it the best I could,
Right.
you know, without too much strange punctuation. So it looked as close to English as possible, even though it's clearly Arabic.
Yeah.
But I didn't want any kids saying, "What's this apostrophe doing here in the middle of the word?"
What does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. The last question is, what are you working on now? Is there anything that's coming up that you're really excited about?
You mean writing?
Actually, anything. Whatever you got.
Okay, well, I'm a full-time pediatric nurse, so I am actually, I've got a completely more than 40-hour-a-week caseload, and I have 2 teenagers, and I got a couple of friends running for office, and a lot of the writing I've been doing right now is they've been sending me their rough material, and I've been turning it into something that they could say as a speech or publish in the paper. So I've been the secret writer of all these female friends who are now running for office. So
Yeah.
that's what my writing time has been spent doing that. A lot of nonfiction, speech kind of writing.
Do you think in the future you're going to write, maybe not a book, but like an essay or something on this experience of like becoming more politically involved in the area? And
I actually started a blog.
oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm Chalfoun.com, and I was doing a lot of writing for that, and I've since dropped off because I've been writing for my friends, but I've been writing on Facebook, I've been writing on Twitter, I've been getting much more politically involved, like a lot of the free time that I used to be sort of quiet, retiring, and doing my own little thing. And lately I've just been getting out into the public sphere with my friends and, you know, just doing a lot of that. And it's interesting. It's actually really fun. I kind of wish at some point in my younger days I decided to work in politics, but it's also kind of strange, and you know, putting my stuff out there in a nonfiction way, that feels kind of so much less safe. When you write fiction, you always have an excuse. Oh, it's just fiction, you know. But when you write nonfiction, it's you saying this thing, and
you're kind of opening yourself up.
yeah, and people can say, I don't agree with that thing that you just said, and so, and as we all know, these are contentious political times.
One could say.
Yeah, one could say.
Yeah, it definitely takes a different kind of courage to write opinion and nonfiction, and like especially like for politics, for people to be consuming, because you have to like.
And it's also, you know, this book is the book where I kind of came out as an Arab American. Most of the people who know me just go, "Oh, preppy white lady," you know, and
yeah,
even though
with your last name,
people don't know a lot. I mean, you know, because you work in the Arab American National Museum and maybe know some other Arab Americans, and I can figure out someone's nationality by their last name, but the average Joe walks around thinking they don't know any Arab Americans, and they say appalling things as a result.
Yeah.
So I came out and said, yes, I am the Arab American in the room, you know, and so this is an interesting time to walk around saying that very publicly. And now I'm just going for it. I'm kind of having fun with it. I'm like, yeah, shocker.
Shocker. Do you have any advice for like aspiring authors who want to write young adult fiction?
The most important thing is to just finish. I think so many people have great ideas. They get 3/4 of the way through, and then either because of fear or just time constraints, you can't finish. And I mean, that took me 5 years from beginning to being in the covers of the book. And it was just because there would be times when I could not write for a really long time. But if you just kept coming back, and I think a lot of people don't keep coming back, and then when it's done, be brave enough to put it out there. You know, the way that I published my first book was I went to a writers' conference where there were agents and editors. Honestly, I don't know how it's done nowadays. You know, I lucked out because that was back in the day before everything was online. You actually met human beings in physical spaces. So I don't really know how it happens now. So I still had those contacts. I quit writing for a long time, and so when I came back to it, I could still call people. But I do know that most people that I speak to, young writers, say, oh, I was writing this thing, but,
Mm-hmm.
and then they never actually completed it. So just finish it, you know.